Today I'll be going through 12 of the worst popes and quite possibly worst men in history, whose atrocities will make this video impossible to monetize. So please like, comment and share with as many people as you know. And of course, if you haven't already done so, don't forget to subscribe and press that little bell notification so you don't miss any future videos. Shockingly, many of these popes were so evil they even tried to exceed the vices of their predecessors.
I'm Satan!
I'm Satan!
I'm Satan!
I'm Satan! I'm Satan! I'm Satan!
I'm Satan! I'm Satan!
No, you're not. I am.
Number 1 to top this list will horrify even the most secular, but yes, all of these men were who the Roman Catholic Church instated and venerated as Vicars of Christ. The list of bad popes and anti-popes is far greater than this and would take hours to present, but here are 12 of the worst. Paul II. Pope Paul II was a very immoral man and was accused of such by King George's apologist Gregory of Heimberg, which then led to his excommunication, something the RCC seemed to regard as some kind of punishment for speaking out against its crimes.
He's a very naughty boy!
Though in many cases its punishments were far more severe. The Renaissance humanist writer and member of the papacy Bartolomio Platina was imprisoned and later interrogated under torture for merely writing a pamphlet expressing his disapproval of the Pope. Paul II accused Platina and the Roman Academy of a conspiracy to assassinate him as a way of justifying the torture, which was unsuccessful because Platina was later released. Shockingly, torture was quite common within the RCC, and many popes did this, including most, if not all, of the ones in this list. Pope Paul II's lavish lifestyle and personal treasures were ridiculous, and included 800 gemstones, a diamond worth 7,000 ducats, that's over £1 million sterling by today's price of gold, 54 silver shells filled with pearls worth 300,000 ducats, that's over 51 million sterling, and the same amount again in jewels and gold intended for refashioning. One of the first things he did once elected was rebut the pact he signed with his other cardinals prior to election, especially the parts that dealt with papal authority, claiming it to be merely guidelines for the mandate. He then drew up a new pact and forced all cardinals to sign it with threats of excommunication if they didn't. I guess to these cultists that's a big issue. This Pope's death is one to be remembered, to say the least. Some say he died from eating melons in excess, whilst others say he died of a heart attack while being sodomized by a page boy. Either way is quite disturbing, and an interesting end to this Pope's reign of terror. Sixtus IV. Sixtus IV, founder of the Spanish Inquisition, yep, that Spanish Inquisition, was personally involved in the Part C conspiracy to assassinate members of the Medici family and have them replaced with his nephew. When Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici discovered the plot to assassinate them both and had the main organiser hanged, Pope Sixtus IV responded by starting a civil war with Florence, which lasted 2 years. His nepotism was unrivalled, appointing many secular friends and relatives to cardinals, including 6 nephews, one of whom became one of the richest men in Rome. According to the Italian historian Stefano Infessura, Sixtus was a lover of boys and sodomites, quote, who awarded them for sexual favours, and he was not the only one to accuse Sixtus of this. English churchman John Bale made similar accusations which led to a firm rebuttal by a historian of the Catholic Church, Ludwig von Pastor. Instead of outlawing prostitution and condemning it, Sixtus IV put a tax on it for his own financial gain. Remarkably, the hypocrite had 6 illegitimate children of his own, one of whom was with his sister, yet had the audacity to tax members of his clergy for having mistresses. Alexander VI. Alexander VI came from the infamous Borgia family, known throughout history for its immorality and libertinism, which is like an extreme form of hedonism. This lascivious man, who had no intention to be pious in any way whatsoever, was so brazenly carnal he invited 50 prostitutes to strip at a dinner party which became known as the Banquet of Chestnuts, whereby chestnuts were thrown on the floor for them to pick up, and prizes were given to the man who could have intercourse with the most women. As you can probably imagine, he is yet another pope to father several illegitimate children, but that should go without saying by now, as with nepotism, which this pope was also notorious for. He fathered 9 illegitimate children in total, and had incest with his own daughter, who also had incest with her brother. Quite the family. Is it just me, or does everyone within the Roman Catholic Church seem kind of odd? This pope pimped his own daughter Lucrezia to several wealthy and powerful men whenever it was profitable to do so, and indulged in lavish weddings for his bastard children with church funds. Once he'd exhausted those, he resorted to selling church positions to the highest bidders, and the ingenious, or rather disingenuous, selling of absolution. Bless you, my son. He also threatened to lay an interdict upon the city of Florence if Savonarola did not stop exposing Rome and its papacy for the brothel it had become. Florence acquiesced with the Pope out of fear that its merchants in Rome would be thrown into jail. Savonarola was then brought to Rome and tried as a heretic, tortured in the most horrific ways, hanged and burned. It was for Alexander VI's heinousness especially that the Protestant Reformation was initiated by Catholics. Leo X. Following in the footsteps of Alexander VI, Leo X's likewise indulgences were also responsible for the formation of the Reformation. This guy took the selling of indulgences to a whole new level, making it affordable to the masses, with one seller's sales pitch being, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs." Purgatory? Yeah, we have a word for that these days. As well as others. Muppets galore! He was a homosexual, bankrupted the church, etc., etc. But hey, that stuff's perfectly normal in the Vatican. What's the problem? Paul III. Pope Paul III is infamously known as the Pimp Pope. He pimped his sister to Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, who later became known as Pope Alexander VI, also included in this list. He had incest with his own daughter, and was also murderous. He was as corrupt as they come. Church offices were up for auction as usual, and he became the pimp of Rome's tens of thousands of prostitutes by taking a percentage of their earnings. Julius III. Here's another deranged and shameless pope who was not afraid to flaunt his paedophilia, especially with adolescent boys, one of whom he would openly boast about for his skill in bed, despite being advised that this was building him a reputation as an old pervert. This infamous affair with the 13-year-old boy Innocenzo became known as the Innocenzo scandal. Julius III simply didn't care, and on the contrary, made Innocenzo a cardinal. His flaunting became more apparent after he plundered church coffers to decorate his mansion with statues and frescoes of boys sodomizing each other, redefining late Renaissance art as we know it. Sergius III. Sergius III gracefully rose to the throne by having his two predecessors strangled to death. Yes, by ordering the anti-Pope Christopher and Pope Leo V to be murdered, he was then able to appoint himself as Pope. He is the only Pope to have murdered another Pope, and an anti-Pope. He was also an active participant in the demented cadaver synod of Pope Stephen VI, who exhumed the corpse of his predecessor for Moses to put on trial. There's never a dull moment in the RCC. Finally, Sergius III was yet another pope to father an illegitimate son who later became Pope John XI. Urban VI. Immediately after being elected, Pope Urban VI's extreme and excessive preaching to the cardinals caused some to believe that he had gone power mad and was unfit for leadership. The following is what German historian and diplomat Ludwig von Pastor had to say about him. He lacked Christian gentleness and charity. He was naturally arbitrary and extremely violent and imprudent, and when he came to deal with the burning ecclesiastical question of the day, that of reform, the consequences were disastrous. This Pope's extreme violence is exemplified when he complained that the cardinals he had tortured weren't screaming loud enough. Benedict the Ninth. Described by St. Peter Damian as a demon from hell in the disguise of a priest, and also Pope Victor III as having a life as a pope so vile, so foul, so execrable, that I shudder to think of it, Benedict IX is yet another monster to befit the throne of the RCC. Despite making this list, he became Pope 3 times, albeit by force, and was the only man to be Pope more than once. He was also the first Pope to ever resign, selling the papacy to his godfather, but later regretting this decision and returning. Among his numerous iniquities were rapes, murders, and other unspeakable acts of violence and sodomy. John the 22nd. I'll sum this Pope up with one quote. He was full of avarice, more worldly than a pimp, and with a laugh that crackled with unimprovable malice. Boniface VIII. This Pope was so evil he can be found in the 8th circle of hell in Dante's Inferno. He had a knack for upsetting the wrong people, including the Italian poet, writer and philosopher Dante Alighieri, King Albert I of Germany, and King Philip IV of France. King Philip's troops stormed the Pope's residence and had him severely beaten. He died a month later of a high fever. Following that, he was accused of sodomy and heresy at a posthumous trial. Legend had it that Boniface VIII became mad from an injury he sustained whilst being deposed and imprisoned, a madness which caused him to gnaw at his hands and bash his brains out. Nice. This legend was disproved, however, upon the examination of his corpse following its accidental exhumation in 1605. And finally, the worst Pope in history award goes to John XII. As if all the others weren't bad enough and worthy of first place, there is one Pope who outshines them all. Pope John XII, the youngest of all the popes, is arguably the worst Pope in history, and as with many others, his excessive adultery led to his untimely death at the age of 27, either by a stroke or an enraged husband who beat him to death. One historian said his pontificate became infamous for the alleged depravity and worldliness with which he conducted it, which included turning the Lateran Palace into a brothel, selling church offices and titles to fund his lavish lifestyle, and ordaining a 10-year-old boy as bishop. One of his favourites, no doubt. His reputation was so licentious that women were warned not to attend his church. He slept with his niece, his father's concubine, and reportedly his 2 younger sisters. He was an alcoholic, gambler, hunter, fornicator, adulterer, rapist, and murderer. As with Urban VI, he was extremely violent and a psychopath, castrating one deacon and blinding his own confessor before murdering both. According to Liutprand of Cremona, some of the charges made against John XII at the Synod of Rome in 963 included dressing as a soldier, setting fires, invoking Venus and Jupiter, as well as many other demons, whilst gambling, and toasting to the devil with wine in front of St. Peter's altar. Now there's a worthy Vicar of Vice and Antichrist, if I ever did hear one. Okay folks, that's it, the worst popes in history. Please comment in the box below which one you think was the worst. If you like this video, please check out the next, where I expose Pope Francis for his unforgivable sin of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, which he announced to the crowds at St. Peter's Basilica back in 2014. Next up, I'll be going through all the heresies of Pope John Paul II, some of which include: the New World Order is needed for the world, the New World Order is holy unity, all men are saved, the Catholic Church is joined to heretics, well, at least he admits it, the Catholic Church has a bond with false religions, and the Catholic Church rejoices when heretics preach. Yes, I think we're getting the picture. So what's new then? Remarkably, there are approximately 1.3 billion Catholics today, despite the fact that most of Catholic doctrine, namely the Catechism, was written not by God, but by men like this. I'm sorry, did you say 1.3 billion?